Bitcoin is pristine collateral. It's theoretically the ideal collateral against which to take a loan. And so we felt that by us doing this deal with Silvergate Bank, long term. And the reason I say do not sell your Bitcoin is because if I look back at my life as an investor, the things that I regret are when I found a really good idea and I underinvested in it. Like Google was a good idea, Facebook was a good idea, Apple was a good idea, Amazon was a good idea. A digital monopoly that changes the world for 1 billion people is a good idea. And yet, the most common two mistakes after finding a good idea is, first mistake is someone says something, they talk crap about your idea, there's FUD, oh, Australia's going to tax Google, or somebody's going to Amazon's going to get regulated, or something will happen, and so people panic sell. And so whenever there's anxiety in the market and you panic sell and then you never buy back in, you regret that. And the second thing you always regret is you wish you bought more. And so a lot of people in the world, I mean, they're basically being knocked around and traumatized because the media is incentivized to generate a new story every day, and if it bleeds, it leads. And nobody wants you. Take the money you want to give to your grandchildren, convert it to Bitcoin, put it in cold storage, and wait. Let the rest of the world do the work, and you'll be the beneficiary of all the intelligent people, no matter where they might be in the world. You'll be the beneficiary of all their work with doing nothing else. There's only one mistake you can make. And the mistake you can make is study the world, get anxiety about something to set an example for corporations. And so Bitcoin is pristine collateral. It's theoretically the ideal collateral against which to take a loan. And so we felt that by us doing this deal with Silvergate Bank, it would make other banks either jealous or comfortable. And hopefully we'll see an entire Bitcoin banking sector evolve. And we want to support Silvergate Bank, as they move into this space. I think on the flip side, from the point of view of a Bitcoin holder, there's been this meme of, oh, well, I buy some Bitcoin, I wait, and eventually I sell it to buy a Lambo. And I think it's very important for people to know that if you owned my house in Miami Beach is 305 times as expensive as it was in 1930 when it was first sold. I have the bill of sale on my wall. If you back calculate, you conclude that the actual inflation rate of the money supply against scarce desirable assets is 7% a year for 100 years. The government statistic is less than 2%. And so you just have to ask yourself the question, do I want to sell something going up in value 7% a year when I could borrow money at 3% a year? And of course, the Bitcoin is more extreme. I mean, Bitcoin is appreciating not because of the rate of currency expansion, but also because of the rate of general mainstream investor adoption, and also because of the increase in technical utility due to things like Lightning and the beautiful things that are being done by Cash App and the like. So, we set up a credit line, we borrow against it, we do it responsibly. We have $5 billion in collateral, we borrowed $200 million. So I'm not telling people to go out and take a highly leveraged loan. What I am doing, I think, is doing my best to lead the way and to normalize the Bitcoin-backed financing industry. And I think the corporate beneficiaries will be the Bitcoin miners. We're not the only ones with a Silvergate credit line. Marathon did a credit line with Silvergate Bank against their Bitcoin. So there's 24 publicly traded Bitcoin miners around now. And so I think there should be dozens and dozens of publicly traded companies that are doing this. I think there's a lot of Bitcoin holders that have always despaired they'd have to sell their Bitcoin, but they didn't want to. I had many people that are large Bitcoin holders text me and message me after they read about our deal, and they said, can you hook me up with the bank, I want to do the same exact thing. And I was like, no problem, here you go. And so I think it helps them. I think it also is very helpful in the institutionalization and the maturity of the asset class. Because if you roll the clock back to the 90s, it used to be, in Mexico, you couldn't get a mortgage. And you couldn't, I hired a bunch of people from Mexico City, and they said, Mike, we have to pay cash for a car, and we can't get a mortgage. And so no one can buy anything.
Yeah.
At the point that people started securitizing cars and securitizing houses, and remember the great American program was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the idea was to make it easy to securitize mortgage so that you could drive down the price of borrowing so that a 23-year-old could buy a house. And I think that Bitcoin as an asset class, right, is going to benefit from the same securitization and the same financial development. As people realize they can borrow against something, then they realize they never have to sell it, and then they start to stretch their time horizon from it's a 36-month speculation to it's a 36-year holding. I really want people to think of it as the family farm. I'm living on this beautiful farm because my grandfather or my great-great-grandmother came here and said, this is where we should make a life. I'm not selling it, right? This is my vehicle to achieve my goals and my children's goals. Now, I tell people we will be buying Bitcoin at the top forever. I'm not trying to time the market. I don't intend to stop. You could think of MicroStrategy as we're kind of like your non-existent spot ETF.
Yeah.
If there was a spot ETF, you'd be paying 1% fee, and it would be not leveraged. With MicroStrategy, we have a software company that generates cash flow, and so we convert our cash flows into Bitcoin, and so we don't charge you a fee. We give you a yield. And between the cash flows from the software company and just a little bit of leverage that we can take via things like the Silvergate loan, we can give you a spot ETF that generates a 4 or 5% tax-deferred yield. And that's kind of an exciting thing. And when will we stop? Well, why would we ever stop? Well, we'll just keep accreting. It should get exponentially more expensive to buy the Bitcoin, but that's okay. When Bitcoin's 500,000 a coin, someone's going to say, well, why are you buying that? You bought some at 10,000. And the answer is going to be, because it's more scarce, desirable property than anything else that I could buy. And when will you sell it? You're not going to sell it until you've got something better to buy, but there isn't anything that I could see in this universe better to buy. So as we generate cash flows, we think that the responsible thing to do for our shareholders is we convert currency which is devaluing into an asset which is appreciating. And we don't diversify because we're a public company and we have a strategy in our 10K, and our shareholders know what to expect. They want us to pursue this strategy. They can diversify, right? If you want to be 2% exposed to Bitcoin, you put 2% of your portfolio in a MicroStrategy, and the other 98% of your portfolio, you can invest in whatever you want. They don't want the CEO of a publicly traded company to be unpredictable and random.
Yeah.
So you can imagine if I said, Mackenzie, I think I'll buy some of this, but if I feel better about that, or if I feel the risk is different, then I'll change. And the problem with that is that no one else can rely upon us. And I think trust, it's a paramount theme. Trust is what built Bitcoin. Bitcoin is this universal trust network. And the people that all these people here love this is because they found something that they can depend upon and they can trust across borders, across time, across cultures. And that is such a precious thing. In the capital markets, the same thing holds. If you want to run a publicly traded company, it is very important that your shareholders trust you and your customers trust you. And trust means be predictable and do what you say you're going to do, right? And let other people, someone wants to hedge, they can hedge, right? I'm not going to hedge for them. I'm going to stay true to our mission. And when we decide to change our mission, we'll disclose it in an 8K, a 10K, or a 10Q, and the market will react accordingly.
Do you want to lend out your Bitcoin to generate yield?
We've thought about it. You know, we have all this collateral. We have $5 billion of unpledged Bitcoin, and we thought, do we lend it to someone to generate yield, or do we borrow against it? Okay, so we borrowed $205 million against it, bought $195 million of Bitcoin, and we generated a tax-free yield, right? So in essence, we bought Bitcoin. You don't have 125,000, you have 129,000 now. You got an extra 4,000 Bitcoin, and then whatever gain we get will be tax deferred. So we figured that was a tax-efficient strategy because, you know, we've got interest payments, and it's also tax-efficient for our shareholders because we're not incurring an operating income charge or a dividend charge. We could have gone to, we could go to an organization and lend them some Bitcoin. They would lend it out to someone else. They would give us a yield. That someone else would short the Bitcoin in the market, and then we would be taking the counterparty risk. And if they lend it out and then their balance sheet unwinds, we lose our Bitcoin. Okay, so that was a risk, and we didn't have a counterparty that we wanted to put $1 billion of our Bitcoin with, because we have to calculate what's the theoretical risk versus the yield. And then if you calculate the theoretical risk versus the after-tax yield, they pay us a yield, we have a taxable income stream. What you realize there is you're working very hard, taking a lot of risk to get not very far after tax. And then the other possibility is, look, if a big bank, if JP Morgan wanted to custody our Bitcoin and pay us a yield, so it felt risk-free, just about as close to risk-free as possible, then we'd just be comparing the, do we want taxable income versus do I want Bitcoin exposure? And if you think that Bitcoin's going to go up 50% a year, no one's paying you 50%